I grew up in a very risk-averse home, and therefore to go to the largest employer that I could find who was going to grant me the greatest level of security was really my objective. And my father-in-law would often tell me, David, why are you working for Deutsche Bank? Why are you giving them all your energy? Do it for yourself. And I used to think he was crazy. Being blunt, I think I was too scared to fail. What if it didn't work out? People don't leave a company, they leave a boss. Everybody, without fail, wants to be appreciated, wants to be valued. If you trust your staff to do a job, then trust them that they're doing it well if you've trained them. If you haven't trained them, then jolly well train them before you throw them in. It's a very, very tiring existence because everything is in the urgent, important quartile, and it's very hard to operate that because it's a bit of the swan analogy where everything on the water's fine, but you're kicking like hell. You can do that for a few weeks. You can do that in busy season. You can do that in the run up to Christmas, whatever. But if you're doing that indefinitely, you will burn out.
David, I want to know your story. Where did you get started? Your career has a very colourful timeline, including some highly regarded positions in firms such as Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, and many others. Give us your full story into the business world in full HD.
Sure. So I studied accounting and finance here in London, and I subsequently went to KPMG to do tax. I think the rationale at the time was I grew up in a very risk-averse home, and therefore to go to the largest employer that I could find who was going to grant me the greatest level of security was really my objective. I sort of chuckle when I think about that in hindsight, but at the time, that was very much the case. So I went to KPMG, did my exams, actually didn't enjoy it too much. Great bunch of people, but it was very, very structured. And this is what you're going to do in your first year, and this is what you're going to do in your second year and your third year, etc., etc. So I did my exams and then actually was desperate to move on. And in fact, in my exit interview, and I remember it very fondly, I sat down with a senior partner of the firm, a fellow who had been there his entire career, and he was already in his 60s. And he said to me, David, you're leaving so soon. I think it was like 20 months. And I said to him, a wise man once said, the big four are brilliant at running other people's businesses, but can't run their own. And he turned around, and I was waiting for his reaction. And he turned around to me and said, David, I think you're spot on. I left with some fond memories, but it was very, very structured. And there was no scope really for individuality or the opportunity to sort of progress at a faster pace. And I went to Deutsche Bank and joined what was a new business in prime brokerage, which was servicing hedge funds. And I came in on the tax side because they'd just gone through an acquisition of Bankers Trust, and my background was in tax. I stayed there for 5 years, moved very quickly within those 5 years from tax onto the business side, supporting clients, and had a really, really good time. After 5 years, Merrill Lynch came to town to do that same business. They were previously operating only in the US, prime brokerage, and they wanted to go international. So I joined the founding team there at Merrill, which was great fun. Bit of a roller coaster. We lived through the 2008 Lehman saga, and Merrill's wouldn't have been too far behind. Bank of America came in and bought us out. And over the course of that time, so I was really getting towards my 10 years in banking. I sort of developed a bit of the startup bug and wanted to do something that didn't involve sort of working in an organization of 150,000 people. And I went to join a startup company that was looking to deliver transparency to the investment management industry, and I was a founder there. And I worked there for a couple of years, built a platform, an operating platform, but then it became very much a tech company, and I'm not a techie, so I decided to veer back towards prime brokerage and sort of the hedge fund financing.
Before you move on, I'm just intrigued about that position. What was your specific role over there in helping that business get up, and what exactly did they do?
So the position was COO, build out the platform, the operation to grant transparency to institutional investors over their investment. So you're an insurance company, a pension fund, and you could have 20 investments or 220 investments across different funds, different geographies, different securities. But if you were to ask, well, what's my exposure to the euro? What's my exposure to Greece? It's very hard to work that out because you can't look at your investments all, at the same point in time on the same basis.
Was this for the end user? Or was this for the pension companies at the top?
Correct. It was for the institutional investors who were going to pay us a small fee to do that sort of work.
Right.
And that progressed and that went live, and that became really a tech platform. Not being a techie and it becoming such a tech operation, there was gradually a decreasing amount of involvement on my part, which wasn't to my liking, and therefore I left and went to Commerzbank to build a clearing platform for a certain product. It was interest rate swaps and credit derivatives. They provided the client base and they provided the technology. but didn't know how to sort of weed it all together or wire it all together. So I did that. This was a former colleague of mine from Merrill Lynch who brought me in, and we did that for 3 years. Got that up and running, which was really good fun. And then I moved on to Société Générale, the French bank, to work and lead the prime brokerage operation and expand that to sort of get that beyond the UK, make that global, which is what we did. And I was instrumental, if I can use that word, to globalize the business. We had an operation in the US, in Asia, clearly in the UK, and we opened a branch in Chennai in India in order to, run the whole back office. And then in 2019, I decided, well, you know what, I've done my time, done my 20 years in banking, thoroughly enjoy helping businesses to scale, to grow, to offshore, to outsource, to all sorts of restructuring, but all with the same goal of enabling a business to operate more efficiently, not necessarily with greater headcount, on the contrary, can't keep things slick and efficient. And I moved into doing this more for myself. Clearly, my background and my network were very much in financial services, but I veered towards owner-managed businesses. Why owner-managed businesses? I think it's far more rewarding working with the owners, with the founders, and you make far bigger difference if you can actually have an impact in terms of restructuring the business, bringing clarity to the operating model. And this is where I am today.
Fascinating. I just want to touch on one point. You mentioned you grew up in a very risk-averse home, but you've really been out there, putting yourself, knocking on big doors and accomplishing some really, what other people might just perceive as risky opportunities, or, working for big people and really hitting for the stars. Was there any point in your life, whether it was in your education system or even through that risk-averse system of your family and upbringing, that just let you go so far?
So it's interesting you should ask. And I often think back because my wife, bless her, comes from a very risk-taking family, a real entrepreneurial family. And I come from a very risk-averse home. And of course, that manifests itself in a lot of conversations and sort of discussions of, whether it's to do with education, upbringing of children, or of course in business. And my father-in-law would often tell me, David, why are you working for Deutsche Bank? Why are you giving them all your energy and all your ideas? Do it for yourself. And I used to think he was crazy. But it took me time to sort of come around to developing a more balanced risk approach that actually I'm better off working and developing my own skills, and not necessarily for myself, but in a closer cohort rather than working in a big co. And the big co's got huge amounts to offer, and you learn a lot and you meet some great people, but at the same time, it's very hard to develop an entrepreneurial spirit. Sure. But it sometimes comes as a result of sort of not quite rebelling, but sort of seeing enough of the mega-sized companies and sort of so many teams and so many places to hide, sort of thing, that actually you're better off in the other domain. And to be honest, I haven't looked back.
Was it a gradual gradient phase out from the big co's into your own business, or did you just take that leap once you had that confidence?
It was gradual, and eventually I just took that leap. It actually got to a point where at SocGen, where I had become a self-employed sort of consultant, and it came to a very nice crossroad where they turned around and said, well, we'd like you to be part of the management team internally, et cetera, but actually, that was a good opportunity for me to turn around and say thanks, but no thanks. I'll go my own way.
Fascinating. I'm sure a lot of people can identify with that. I mean, I grew up in a very risk-averse environment, and I was literally at the same position, obviously not on that scale, but this idea of going out and doing my own thing, that security of a paycheck at the end of the month for a lot of people just caps them from seeing beyond their own capabilities and what they can achieve if they were to go on their own. And obviously, there's an argument on both sides, but it's...
Right. I think for myself, being blunt, I think I was too scared to fail. What if it didn't work out?
The big what if.
Yeah, correct. What if it didn't work out? And it's a very valid concern. And certain different times of a person's life, it's of greater concern. A person's got to trust one's instinct as well. And, one develops one's network over the course of time, of course, one's reputation, one's skill set, and one takes everything with along the way. I mean, the big firms, whether it's KPMG and all the banks that I mentioned, they are fantastic training arenas, a great opportunity to learn, to develop, to pick up skills along the way, but then you take them with you and you become a more valuable, better rounded person.
How do you define the mission that you are on today?
The mission that I'm on at the moment and today is really around enabling owner-managed businesses to operate and to function more efficiently. Benefit of that is, of course, running a more profitable business, less frustrations, more excitement. And at the same time, I spend quite a lot of time helping startup managers who have great ideas potentially, don't actually know where to turn in order to be able to structure their business for the long term and make sure it delivers sort of maximum value.
Okay, very cool. I think we're also seeing a plethora of young service providers calling themselves founders directors, business owners. And before we get into the meat of today's conversation, can you draw up some parameters for us as to when a business is called a business?
I would say a business is when it starts developing a bit of a track record. It's got a reputation, it's revenue generating, and it's actually delivering some great value to its customers. But until I have really gone through a full cycle, or preferably a few cycles of the business with its clients, I think it'd be premature to really call it a business. It's really about client acquisition, servicing the client, and then that's the post-service support thereafter. The client might come back either to query, to change things. I mean, again, it depends on the nature of the business, and they'll go through the full service cycle. That could be chronology. It will definitely be the pre, the during, and the post, the actual core service. And until a client's been through that, and preferably a few clients have been through that.
Okay, so interesting. So what I'm hearing is that it's not about size or team size or infrastructure size or client base. It's about that process of being able to onboard, discover a client's needs, deliver a service, and repeat that. And once there's a system, wheels are moving in that motion, we've got what's defined as a business.
I think so. I think the business is really when it's tried and tested, and the business operator, the founder, the owner, and we can come to those titles and labels shortly, they're far clearer about and much more secure in their position, what they're doing, who they're delivering, what for. Sometimes it's a case of also saying no rather than being everything to everybody. But when they've gone through that cycle a few times, then and it's actually they've demonstrated that they can deliver value and generate a sale with a decent margin, that's already a business.
Fascinating. Really love that. So you've gone from this big environment over those 20 years. Would there be 3 core principles that you could extract from everything that you saw on the big environments and the big hierarchical structures that you saw there that you feel can be adapted and implemented by smaller owner-managed businesses?
Absolutely, and probably more things than 3. But and some of these mindsets or philosophies I absolutely adopt in my day-to-day with dialogues and interactions with owner-managed businesses, irrespective of how big or small they are. Whilst being in banking, I became a bit of a process junkie. So that's also part of my psyche, that I like to see a very structured, methodical approach.
Columns and rows. I think we share a lot of similarities.
Correct. And some of the banks and some of the operating teams, they operate exactly like that. I worked for some very impressive managers over the years who were very particular, very meticulous in receiving meeting minutes, in being absolutely meticulous about keeping to schedules and diary management, being very structured in their approach and their thinking. Present me your case, we'll look at the economics of it, we'll make a decision, and we move on. Some were exactly the opposite. They were sort of analysis paralysis. They would continuously wanting to analyze. But when I go into owner-managed businesses, irrespective of how new or mature they might be, I look to see what's the process, what's the clarity in the roles and responsibilities that people operate with. And invariably, you'll find people who are, sometimes it can be all over the place. And if it's all over the place, you just know that some of the decision-making is also all over the place. A bit of, it's the same philosophy as a tidy desk, tidy mind, right? So I walk into my teenagers, my kid's bedroom, and if I see a tidy desk, I know that odds on they're all, they're on top of it in school, they're organized, and they're structured. They're not running behind, chasing their tail.
You're getting me nervous now.
Yeah, exactly, but it's the same. But it's the same in business. You walk into businesses and you turn around and ask for an org chart. You turn around and ask, well, do people have job descriptions? Are they clear about their roles and responsibilities? What happens when they need to escalate? Is there a delegation matrix? Or do things fall between the cracks endlessly? And is there frustration because it's your job, my job, he thought, she thought sort of mentality? And when that goes on, you just know that decision-making is poor. It's not going to be an agile, sort of slick environment where you can make quick decisions, move on, satisfy a customer request, that sort of thing, because actually it just sort of falls between, it gets left until somebody shouts. And then you become a very reactive organization. So the organizations or teams, or even individuals that I worked for who were quite proactive, who I knew before I went into a meeting what the agenda was, what the discussion was, what is the debate, what are we trying to achieve? You knew you were going to get the result out of that meeting, that hour, half an hour, whatever it was. But if it just became a bit of a chit chat and nobody actually knew what the agenda was, you're not going to achieve anything. So that's down to people and personalities. So that can exist both in a large corporate and also in a small environment.
Fascinating. So if we want to extrapolate and say these 3, let's just say, you said there might be a dozen of them, but sort of 3 points which somebody listening to this who can walk away and say, right, I've really got to start organizing A, B, and C in my business, at least to get myself into a better shape to even have a conversation with somebody like yourself? What would be the three core things you want to see happening at a small business?
I want to see objectives. I want to see corporate objectives or individual objectives, or ideally both. Meaning, what are we looking to achieve? What that person you're thinking of hiring, what is it you want them to do? What does good look like? So objectives is one. And clear roles and responsibilities. In a large team and definitely in a growing team, what is it that you're looking for the team? What is it that they need to do, individually or functionally? Those are two key areas that I always look to ensure we develop. At a high level, it's about vision. Is there a vision for the firm? Does the firm know what it's trying to achieve? So much of successful execution and sort of functioning of a firm is down to its people. Is there proper people management? Do they get appraisals? Do they know? Do they get good feedback? Is there a mechanism to deliver that? Or is it just like, on the off chance, you're going to give me some feedback about how things have gone? People don't know. There are too many people who are just going through their day to day without actually knowing, actually, I'm not sure if my boss is happy with what I'm doing. I know if he's not happy or she's not happy, but actually I'm not quite sure. And that just means that people aren't operating anywhere near as effectively as they.
Interesting. And then you're saying by default, without that infrastructure in place, the results are going to be that because you're saying that has the business got a vision? Every business knows what they're trying to achieve. They know what they're selling. So they know, but their day to day is just very busy putting out fires essentially, rather than.
Correct. But then you'll find staff who are disillusioned, demotivated, and effectively leave or ultimately leave. People don't leave a company, they leave a boss. I always say that, and invariably it's true.
Wow.
I deal with companies where staff, maybe at operating level, they go about their day to day, but they've got no idea how the company is doing, how the company is performing, on a macro level, and they love it. If there's an opportunity for a quarterly, semi-annual, annual meeting where the boss, the CEO, turns around and says, you know what, I'm going to bring you in, give you an hour presentation take you on the journey of the last 12 months, 6 months, show you what we were looking to achieve, what did we manage to achieve, what went well, what didn't go so well, what are we looking to do in the next 6 months. And by the way, I'm going to tell you why each and every one of you is so valuable and critical to the successful operation at this firm. Founders don't do that. It's out of my comfort zone. They don't need to know. Everybody needs to know. We're talking about a small company. And by the way, the big companies are very good at that. They're very good at calling town halls quarterly, semi-annually, and delivering messages around how the firm's doing. And if we're honest, which teams are working well, or which divisions are delivering well, and which ones are delivering below par. But how much more so in a small firm? If you're a 20 person firm, it's critical and it's imperative that the founder, the owner, the CEO, whoever it is, the senior person, sits down and takes the team into a room and says, okay, I'm going to share with you how things are going. And by the way, I'm going to explain to you why your role, which you might think is just relatively mundane, you're sitting in an ops tactical role, in an admin type role, maybe you're not revenue generating, but actually your role is critical to the successful performance and the profitability of the firm. What that delivers in an hour, the messages that delivers in an hour to the foot soldiers is gold dust. It gets people on side. You might not be able to motivate them to give them bigger paychecks or big bonuses, but you're actually bringing them in on the inside as to why they're so valuable. Everybody, without fail, wants to be appreciated or wants to be valued. But this is just core. This is just basic man management.
Fascinating. Would you say the positive flip side to that would be the ability to start taking things to the next level? Because we see a lot of small businesses that perhaps go from 1 man to 5, 6 or 7 or 10, and almost like somebody climbing up a rock climbing wall, where they get to a certain mid-level and then they're suddenly left grappling, where's the next threshold that I can hang on to thrust me up to that complete new arena. Would you say having those infrastructures in place is what is needed for a small business to go and take that next leap?
It's a critical element to what's needed. Probably the biggest element, and where a lot of owners or sort of sole traders fall foul, is their ability to delegate. Invariably, an owner, a senior, a CEO will turn around and says, well, nobody can do it the way I can, right? And therefore, I'm going to have to do it. Which might be the case, that nobody genuinely can do it the way this person can. However, there's only one of that person, and there are only 24 hours in his day. And therefore, that firm has basically hit a ceiling that this person won't allow anybody else to come on that journey or to take on the tasks that person can rise. Now, you bring on the first couple, that's usually fine. But actually, because it's very easy for somebody, a founder, to keep an eye and keep sort of quite a relatively tight level of management on the first 2 hires, 3 hires, that sort of thing. But as soon as you get into, okay, we're now going to create some teams here, and I'm actually not sure what's going on day to day or to the level of granularity that I'd like or that I'm comfortable with, Now I'm starting to get nervous. So I'm either going to fail because I'm going to try and micromanage people, and people hate to be micromanaged, which means I've got somebody sitting on my shoulder the entire time. So he either doesn't trust me, in which case, what am I doing here? Or he does, but he's just watching me, and therefore he's wasting his time because he's not delivering. He or she's not delivering. So in actual fact, developing skills to be able to delegate, turn around and say, well, you know what? I'm going to trust you to get on, and we're going to catch up, or you're going to give me some feedback once or twice a week, or whatever, on whatever frequency. But actually, all I'm going to be looking at, I don't want to see your day-to-day because I've got to look at my own. Okay. But we'll look at metrics. We'll develop some metrics that we can see how well the team's doing. And I see loads of companies, too many examples to throw out. I've got a client who, when I met the first time, we were just talking about his interaction. He's got a team of about 20, but he was being copied on in every single email. So what are you doing being copied in every? Well, I want to see what's going on. Yeah, but if you trust your staff to do a job, then trust them that they're doing it well if you've trained them. And if you haven't trained them, then jolly well train them before you throw them in. And well, it also gives my team the comfort that they know I'm looking at everything. Yeah, but actually, that's super counterproductive. So either the owner isn't looking at those 700 emails, which actually he wasn't. So then why be copied in on stuff you're not looking at? And if you are, then you're not operating at CEO level. You're basically an operating manager. So that you see that time and time again in different guises and sort of different levels of extremity. That's critical. And people need to learn to delegate in order to be able to operate at the level they need to and the value that they need to operate at, and push work down to people. And nothing enthuses and empowers a member of the team more than the CEO or the boss turning around and saying, you know what, you've been here long enough, you know exactly what you need to be doing, or you're a smart guy, you take on and do this. I used to do this, but you do it now, right? Which in other words is telling the junior, I've got full faith that you can deliver and do the tasks that your senior was doing, but you should be doing them. But actually, economically, if it can be done at a cheaper price point, then it's criminal to be doing it at an expensive price point. That's, for me, is the biggest error and where managers fall foul in terms of being able to scale and grow their organization. Do they truly want to delegate, and are they going to let go?
So that would be that rock that somebody needs to hold on to. It's like cutting off a limb. I mean, you've started this business yourself, and you're just terrified that lead might get lost,
Correct,
or the answer might be wrong and they're going to go elsewhere. So you constantly want to oversee. But
correct,
that's absolutely what's capping.
It's critical. It's critical. It's got to happen. And of course, there's some collateral damage along the way. You get frustrated because the person didn't deliver the way I would. Well, that's fine. Who says they need to? But actually, work is a pyramid, okay? And if the CEO or the boss sits at the top of the pyramid and doing a narrow subset of very high value work, further down the pyramid, you've got people who are, by definition, lower down, and they're operating on a wider base because they're doing more repeat, perhaps more mundane type work, but that can't be done anywhere near the top. I've got to be pushing work down. I've got to be allowing people to get on. Will they do it to my absolute liking? No. But do they need to? Also no. But then I'm the point of escalation. And otherwise, I'm asking myself, I've just hired somebody to do a job, but am I giving him the tools to be able to do the job? And is he delivering at the value that he should be operating? But then invariably, it will fall on the manager as to why that's not working.
Fascinating. You mentioned the pyramid. So the opposite of that would be a box, right? If somebody is not delegating and is maintaining everything within his own proximity, the critical work and the mundane work is all being done by the same person. And obviously there's no room for growth there. But once you've got that pyramid infrastructure, you're able to put the right level work by the right level people. And then the results are that this pyramid can then rocket and take off.
Correct. And there will always be an element of bottleneck because I'm going to go to my boss to get his or her opinion on something, to validate, to approve, to sign off. But actually, if there's too much on my boss's plate that's coming from me and coming from my peers, well, then it's just not going to happen, which means we're not going to get the decisions, we're going to get the bottleneck. But actually, the boss, the CEO, needs to be out there growing the value of the business. What I'm doing might not be growing the value of the business. That might just be maintaining the status quo.
So somebody who's running a business themselves, and they're aware of these 2 points. They know that, A, they've got to be servicing their current client base, but they also know that they want to be building a business. Are we saying that scaling is very much equal hiring the right people? Is that the translation of scaling?
It's probably the biggest factor in being able to scale a business is making sure you've got the right people to work with and also the right model. But at the same time, if I went for a very low level, I bought a house, a relatively cheap house, and therefore I need some conveyancing done by a lawyer. If I went to the senior partner of a firm in the city to do it, and he probably did it 20 years ago as a junior, and he actually did the work, firstly, he's going to charge me his charge out rate, which is going to be an absolute fortune for the value of the deal that's being done. And secondly, I'll be asking myself, why is he doing it? A senior, surely he can delegate it to somebody far more junior and maybe keep an eye if need be. But if he does delegate it, and actually he said, you know what, I'm going to give it to my junior, he's newly qualified, very competent, intelligent, he'll get it done. It should give me a great sense of comfort that actually it's being done at the right price point. So I'm not going to be charged thousands, but I'll be charged a fraction of that because that person's got a much cheaper rate. But actually, I know that they're still under the oversight of the senior person.
Interesting.
Right? So I don't need that uber senior person doing it because that shouldn't be done by that person. So that either tells me that I'm either a super crown jewel client that person doesn't want to let go, or actually they've got their model wrong. Right? And therefore, we've got to look at it from both perspectives. The client must be looking and thinking, why is the senior guy doing my work? My work is pretty mundane. He shouldn't be anywhere near it. He should just know it's being done, but not actively involved. If he's involved, there's something wrong with that model. Maybe he's just not busy. But why is he charging me? He's going to charge me his rate. If he delegates it, the person who's been delegated to will be very happy that they're getting work from the boss and they can get on with work at their level. And the customer's happy because the customer's paying at the right rate as well.
So you're saying there's a level of respect that you can instill in your client base by seeing that you've got this pyramid structure and that the right work is going to the right people.
And you see that in all walks of life and all sorts of clients where the client, the provider, the business, the owner is at times can be very scared. Can I delegate this to somebody else to do? Actually, delegation is a massive sign of strength, not weakness. Right? There's nothing to say I can't take a look, review it, provide a level of oversight. But if I am able to delegate it to somebody else, I'm bringing them up to speed that they can do it at a cheaper point. I'm getting work done at the right level, which is so much more efficient. And then carrying on to do that on an ongoing basis. If I walk into my kid's school and I have a question about what's going on in the nursery where my 3-year-old is sitting, and the head teacher answers the question, or if I go to the head teacher to answer the question, the head teacher is not paid to answer questions in the nursery. The nursery teacher is, right? The nursery teacher should answer. Of course, there's an escalation. If they can't, it eventually finds its way up. But if I go to the head teacher, I don't expect the head teacher to have that level of granularity as to what's going on, and B, they're not paid to do that. So it's completely misaligned.
Fascinating. As businesses do scale and they've taken that step and they're hiring the right people, sometimes perhaps they're scaling quicker than they can handle. What are some of the common pitfalls or mistakes that happen organically but can have very big repercussions later on down the line?
So I would say the biggest repercussion, and by the way, this is quite common as well, the biggest repercussion is the lack of control or quality control, the absence of quality control further down the organization. So if the CEO has got a badge of quality, but actually the training and the delegation isn't tight enough, then decisions are taken by others that are simply not in line with the way the company would operate, either with their vision or with the badge of quality that they would operate with in the past. So then you'd have, that's how customer complaints really happen. You go, well, one second, I've been a customer for the last 3 years, and this is the level of quality, responsiveness, accuracy, reliability, whatever it might be that I'm used to. And all of a sudden I've got this new person who's just doing his own thing and not to the badge. And that would be something that the bosses need to deal with and sort of work out why is it that they're not operating, according to company policy, etc. So actually establishing policies and procedures about how people should operate, not just establishing, executing them and living them, implementing those policies is critical to avoid that sort of thing happening. But, it's not necessarily a quantity. So you mentioned in your question, they might be hiring too many people. It's more of a mindset than anything else. Because actually, if I drill into my team that this is the way I want them to operate, in a balanced approach, that there is the company way of doing things, but of course, there's a level of autonomy that you can apply to it. People know that they've got the parameters within which to operate. So if the operating model is right and actually the procedures are right, then I know the procedures I need to follow. If they're lax, or if they're there but are being ignored, then clearly there's going to be a quality control issue that's going to fall flat on its face.
When you step into a business has called you up saying, David, we've heard what you do. It's time we take a good look at ourselves and start to figure out where things are going and where we want things to go. And if those visions are aligning with what's the reality on the ground, you've got to start asking some difficult probing questions, I'm assuming. Where's money being spent? What are people's roles? What are they supposed to be doing? Are their expectations being met? Are business owners generally open to the critique that you provide? Do you have to tread with caution as you perhaps have to start deconstructing something they may have built over 20, 30 years. Give us a rundown of what it looks like for a business to start this journey of soul searching their processes.
So very, very good question, very valid question, and something that I'm usually very conscious of. Invariably, a prospect client will call me and engage me because they're aware they've got some issues. Okay, the issues might be actually it's operating superbly well. The company is very profitable, but actually they've got no idea what's going on in the background. I had a client who called me up, not in the UK, to say they've got X thousand units in the real estate industry, and he turned around and said to me, I'm paying X $1 million for my ops and finance function, but I've got no idea where the money's going. I've got no idea where the money's going. Very profitable company, but I just don't see any value. I don't know what's going on. Right? So there's a complete breakdown between the owners or the operators, the CEO, and his ops function. Now, there was an absence of reporting and various other things that were going on. But there, somebody's volunteering an issue. And invariably, clients will volunteer and turn around and say, these are the issues that we want you to come and look at. However, what's often the case is you go in there with an idea of what you're looking at because that's what you've been guided towards. But actually, there's the elephant in the room. There's something else that's been completely ignored, and the place is all over the show. There's mass, disillusionment, or there's a lack of engagement, and the boss isn't engaging with his or her staff. So, but generally speaking, in answer to your question, companies are very happy to engage. In fact, they welcome it because they welcome an outside independent view as to what's going on. Usually when people are in the weeds, they only see what they can see. They've got a very narrow aperture and they can see what matters to them, but they don't see the big picture. Now, what matters to them might be important, but actually if there's a forest fire raging on some other area, then that clearly might be the cause of why there's so many issues downstream. And I like to do a discovery and diagnostic exercise to sort of speak to key stakeholders across the board to understand their view on matters. So, I can turn around and tell you that I think I manage my team brilliantly, but actually that's just one view. You've got to sit down with the team or members of the team just to get their view and scenarios, anecdotes as to what's going on and whether they feel they're being managed appropriately. I did quite a large project, pre-private equity deal with a certain firm in the professional service space. It was quite clear that their operating model was, to be honest, was really quite broken. They had far too many people operating. The engagement with clients was quite poor. They were servicing the wrong genre of client in terms of their ability to create an adequate profit margin. So whilst they were being busy, super busy, they were all busy fools. Or a lot of them were busy fools. Some of them recognized it, but a lot of them didn't. And then you have, I can't let go of this client relationship because they've been a client for 25 years. But they've been losing you money for the last 15. So some tough decisions need to be made. But generally speaking, clients are very happy to engage. They recognize and identify either a problem that they've got or an objective that they're trying to achieve and don't feel they can do it without outside input. I don't necessarily have the answers. I'm not necessarily there to give the answers, but I'm there to shine a light and to provide clarity. Just the other day, I met with a new client, a very well-established multi-million-pound business that are struggling with a certain aspect of their business progression.
You're so vague, David.
I know. Well, I'm just trying to be quite coy and careful. But at the same time, so this is a business that's in the home furnishing space, and they are successful business. What I understood was one issue around their ability to generate sales is actually turns out to be an issue that the founders are looking to exit the business, don't have the energy to further the business, and are looking for avenues to address that.
So their concentration, their focus was elsewhere rather than...
Their focus was elsewhere. Their ability to really dedicate themselves to the business in the way they've done in the past is not there. And the frustration is with themselves that actually they want out, right? So, that's quite common to see that sort of thing. Other examples of we can't raise our level of profitability, or we're struggling. Actually, what's the core of the issue? Well, the core of the issue is you can't onboard your clients quick enough. Your speed of acquisition, your client service model might be too expensive. So again, I'm not there to tell them how they can generate greater profit, but I can see there's a big black hole there that's called you've got a very, very expensive client service model, which is lovely for your clients, but then don't be surprised that you can't generate the profit because you're spending too long trying to service those clients for nothing much in terms of margin in return. Another client classic example in the transport space. Very well-established client with a very large business and a very large following, but they don't actually know their clients. They're not close enough to their clients to know which routes or which client type are truly profitable because they've never done that analysis. And this works across the board. I spent time with wealth managers who are servicing all sorts of clients but don't actually know their optimal client. Who is the client that I should be serving? Well, what's your break-even point? Well, I want every client to generate X thousand a year. Okay, well, let's look at the client base and see what percentage of them are doing so. And all of a sudden you get shining a light and realizing actually we're running a very poor business.
Would you say the businesses you're seeing, the situation they're finding themselves in, is this a natural flow of events? If they're not conscious and intentional about the processes or with seeking outside help to get this outside perspective, if they're not intentional about that, is this probably the default mode network of how the business is going to be looking 10, 20 years' time?
It's the default of how a lot of businesses grow. Because if I look at owner-managed businesses, and this is a bit of a generalization, but owners will invariably be sales guys. Okay, and those sales guys are out there to generate revenue. That's their job, and therefore they're out fully focused on revenue generation, and they take their eye, or maybe they didn't even have their eye on in the first place, off the back office of the operating model. And therefore, as long as they're making more money than potentially they're losing, they're happy to operate like that. But actually, there could be fires, raging in the back office and sort of the operating engine, but they're out there as salespeople. Salespeople generally aren't very good operating managers, nor should they be. Their skills are far better placed elsewhere. But all of a sudden, if the sales start either drying up or something else happens, maybe somebody's looking at a valuation of the business and they're thinking, well, actually, no, but they're not actually seeing that they're losing too much money through efficiency, through bad planning, through bad decision making, maybe even just the quality of the people or the engagement. And therefore, you've got this situation that you're winning loads of business, but actually the cost of delivering it is growing and actually hugely eating into your profits. I see it, another client that springs to mind is a client that's super successful and super busy to the extent that they're so over trading that the boss, you'll chase the boss for an answer for 3 days and you'll get an answer at 2 a.m, sort of thing. But actually, one of the key revenue generators there said to me last week, outside our business has got a golden reputation, but inside this place stinks, right? And what he was getting at, maybe it was a bit like my KPMG example of right at the start, but what he was getting at was it's actually hell to work in that company. It's just hell. The pressure, the workload, the need to sort of multitask and juggle everything and sort of everything is last minute and everything's just in time. It's a very, very tiring existence because everything is in the urgent, important quartile and it's very hard to operate that way. Right now, clients might not see it like that because it's a bit of the swan analogy where everything on the water's fine, but you're kicking like hell. You can do that for a few weeks. You can do that in busy season. You can do that in the run up to Christmas, whatever. But if you're doing that indefinitely, you will burn out. You'll burn out. And as I said, people don't leave companies, they leave their boss. And people will leave because they'll say, well, you know what? I'm working I'm working 24/6 or whatever it might be. I can't work like this anymore. Either my work-life balance is completely out of kilter or I don't feel I'm being appreciated, right? Because actually I'm not getting any support. And they go, well, what do you mean? Everybody else is working as hard, right? That doesn't answer the question. That's actually just saying everybody is working like it, and therefore actually taking a step back and say, well, how will we make this sustainable? How will we make it sustainable that we can actually manage this business, grow the business, stay in control, to your point around delegation and being able to delegate and building mini pods or sort of smaller teams that people can interact and collaborate together. And actually that creates a far more sustainable and successful company. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Fascinating. I love what you said about the over trading, that feeling of being so busy and pulling in new business. There's always that excitement, that thrill of signing another client and pulling in another project, but that's coming at the expense of the focus and the intentionality that's required to keep the back office going smoothly. And then
Correct.
eventually it catches up with you. And then
Correct. And how many clients can you support by giving them still giving them a decent service, but not dropping the ball? And there comes a point where actually I've got to take people on. So then people will ask you the question, do I take people on in advance of the work, or do I wait to get the work? Do I build the pipeline of work and then actually say, sorry, I'm going to need a bit more time to deliver? Well, you've got to look at the people, you've got to look at the process. But establishing process, and again, it comes back to the earlier points, the 3 points. Establishing proper process, people know how to operate, and it's about expectation management. Everybody likes to live in a world with minimal number of surprises, right? Nobody wants to be on the roller coaster. I want to have, if I've got strong expectation management, I know if I send an email, I know when I'm going to get a response. If I send a proposal out or request for a proposal, I know how long it's going to get back. And broadly speaking, that's the way I want to be operating. I've got an SLA, I know what I'm getting, I know what each party is giving, I'm paying, I'm getting, etc., within the parameters of what the expectation. But if my expectations are mismanaged, they've got to wait a week and chase 3 times for an answer, I'm not going to go back there. They've lost me as a client.
Fascinating. Right? Do a lot of your clients come because they've decided it's time to start focusing on the sale of the business?
Some do. A lot of them will come because actually they want to grow their business, and they're either a victim of their own success, okay, and they realize they can't operate like that. A lot of them have got other ideas, and therefore they want to develop these other ideas. So I've got a client who is the owners are super driven, and they've every time I talk to them, they've got other ideas about how they can develop the business and other businesses, etc. But actually, it's not worth their while. I don't think it makes economic sense for them to be actively involved with some of their businesses. Better to hire managers in, let them manage those businesses. You're right. You're going to forgo what you need to pay away as salary, but you can develop your other businesses. So sometimes they're a victim of their own success because they're looking to grow, they're looking to expand and go into other markets. Sometimes it is a result of, actually we're looking to sell this business, but actually don't come at the last minute. How are we going to package this business that in 18 months' time, it will be at the best price for sale, right? So actually, you've got to look at the operating model. You've got to look at the interaction between people, process, technology, if there is technology, and saying, okay, how will this business, what do we need to do to make sure this business is as valuable as it could be in 18 months' time when we want to sell it? Do we have a strategy? Do we have a business plan? The numbers that don't have a business plan now might be too late in the run-up to a sale, but actually turning around just before sale and saying, I want to sell this, that's probably too late. That's probably too late in the day.
And viability for sale is when it's a machine that can run. It's got processes that let the wheels turn without it being tied down to one particular person.
Right. You've got key person dependency is disaster, right? That basically means you take that person out of the equation, the business is worth half its value, if that. So to eliminate key person dependency is critical. That means, and it's very common in businesses, sure, right? So they can't let go. And actually all you're buying is the person. Well, nobody wants to buy a person because that person will then resign, retire, be hit by a bus, whatever it might be. And what have I bought? I bought a client list that I can't service. I bought some technology that nobody knows how to use. So actually eliminating key person dependency is critical, and making sure that actually I'm buying a self-standing business or something that will bolt on very nicely into my own business. Well, actually, I have to ask myself at all times, what is it that I'm buying? Am I buying a client list? Am I buying a well-oiled machine that can operate? But actually, even just asking that question is a valuable question.
Fascinating. You've mentioned a number of times time management, and you've been helping businesses of all sizes plug gaps, re-engineer their processes, optimize their operations. Along your journey working with so many different industries and so many different types of people, what can you tell us on the topic of time management? Obviously, we've got technology, we've got automations that are taking over people's jobs and all the excitement that comes with it. Are you seeing people become more productive, or are we just wasting that saved time elsewhere?
I think that's a really, really good question. I think you see it goes in fits and starts. So you see trends. You see people being very focused on time management and they want to use their time productively. But then you also see people, perhaps even the same person at a later point, just being swamped with very maybe valuable clients or client engagement, but actually it's not delivering huge value. And then they turn around at the end of the day and go, I've been madly busy, but I've not generated any revenue. So you get busy fools. So really, and then people fall into this mode of actually, I've really got to deal with time management. Actually, a person's got to be cruel to be kind. Often I'll tell somebody, do you ever sit down with your management team? I don't have time to sit down with my management, is often the answer. I don't sit down with my management. You ever sit down with your company if it's small enough? Right, as I mentioned earlier, sit down with the team monthly, semi-annually, quarterly, and just run through things. I don't have time, right? I don't have time, or it's the best use of time, because actually you're bringing somebody else into your life. You're bringing somebody else into your picture that they can actually take stuff off you, and you're actually having a planning opportunity. I mentioned earlier that too many people live in the urgent, important quartile, which means you're just sprinting like hell, which is very, very tiring. It works in short bursts, but not beyond that. But actually, the number of people who don't start their week or their day with some planning, whether it's for themselves, for the team, what is it we need to get through this week? What are the urgent requirements this week? Where do we want to focus? That planning that 20 minutes or whatever it might be, that round table to discuss how we're going to move forward is so valuable. It brings people on side. It gives people the clarities to know what it is we're working on. Last week's priorities might not be this week's priorities, but taking that time out is critical. Besides for the fact that taking time out for oneself, whether it's gym or going for a walk or just, keeping oneself sort of sane of mind, is very healthy because it keeps a person productive.
Yeah.
We're all made the same. And therefore, sometimes you hear somebody going, you know what, I was 10 o'clock at night or 1 a.m, writing, doing whatever I was doing. And I'm thinking to myself, if you started work at 8, 9 in the morning and you're working at 10 at night, how productive can you really be? Yeah. Right? Even if you are on a particular day. But if you're doing that on a routine basis, forget it. Waste of time.
Interesting. I mean, you've been doing this for so many years now. What can you tell us from this zoomed out timeline of 20 plus years of working with high profile businesses and now working with owner managed businesses? We've seen this big eruption of people trying to get rid of their smartphone, people trying to go back into more simpler communication levels. People are beginning to realize that, being connected 24/6 isn't really helping me be productive. It's not helping me be intentional with my time. We get busy hours of the day just with silly stuff. And then like you're saying, 10 o'clock at night, we're catching up on emails because how much of the time was spent browsing or scrolling. From going back to the sort of zooming out and just seeing people's behaviors, people's habits over so many years, without trying to sound nostalgic, but are there habits or ideas that we can take from people from 10, 20 years ago, how they performed, how they came into work in the morning without all those levels of distraction? And what productivity did you see then that we can say, these are things that we want to implement today and help us achieve better?
Interesting question. I've got 2 small anecdotes, but really, really powerful. And these go back probably around 20 years. It just shows how powerful and they've stuck in my mind. My favorite manager that I ever worked for was a fellow back in 2003, 2004. Technically, he wasn't the smartest guy I ever worked with, but every day at 6 o'clock, he would come round and we were on the trading floor in our own sort of area. And he would go, Dave, what are you still doing at your desk? What kept you busy today? What are the frustrations been? And he spoke to me probably for 2 minutes, and he would go around to talk to the people who were still around and say, how's it going? What are you still doing here? What time do you think you're going to be leaving? I hope you're not staying a late one. And that was just such a powerful man management opportunity. Firstly, it endeared everybody who worked for him. It endeared us all to this fellow. His name was Mark. It didn't matter that he could always answer our questions because he couldn't always answer the questions, but we were always there. He was always there for us. We knew we always had his back, and he was always there to sort of support us. And he encouraged us to, if your boss comes around and encourages you to get out and not stick around to do a late evening, that's telling you basically, Dave, you've got a life outside of work, right? So not necessarily work harder during the day. Can you help? Can you lean on somebody else? Can they help you? And that's really, really powerful. That's really, really powerful. In a similar vein, had another fellow who would make a point of going to talk to everybody in his team at least once a week during the day. And I just think developing that interpersonal relationship with people, I'm not just the person who's behind a keyboard who you can send an email to, because then you can hide behind the screen and you be a keyboard warrior and all that. But actually engaging with people, it is such a powerful moment. It might only last 30 seconds, a minute or two, but at the same time, I've created that relationship with that person, which means that I can get more out of that person and vice versa. And if there's an issue, I know how to raise it. The people who sort of manage by spreadsheet or manage by a metric or whatever it is, that's all well and good keeping an eye on progress, but you're never going to engender a sort of a good, strong, effective working relationship with the person. And that's what it's all about. If I want more out of somebody, they've got to want to do it. And the only way they're going to want to do it is because they want to work for the person. Right? And again, it comes back to my point around if it doesn't work, people leave a boss, they don't leave a company. Right? So when you've got somebody who's actually just interested in managing up and doesn't care about his team, people just get disillusioned. They're not interested. They don't like working for that person. And then eventually look elsewhere.
Really fascinating. On the topic of time management, which we're just going to sort of come towards close up, but my sources tell me that you are somebody who has always made the focus of making time to help, whether it's different charities or people on an individual level, being there to support people. I suppose that goes back to the anecdotes that you were sharing. What would your message be to others as it relates to sacrificing our personal time, however busy people might feel they are, for the service of the community?
Time is the most valuable commodity anybody's got, right? So somebody can write a check and give a lovely donation to a charity. That's very nice. But actually, it doesn't really truly cost them anything. Time is what we sacrifice. Time is what we give. And at the end of the day, we've got to look after our community. We've got to look after the charities. We've got to look after the fabric of our society. And therefore, giving of one's time is the most valuable commodity. Everybody's got what to give. They say even a broken clock is right twice a day and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, if a person uses their time wisely, you always ask a busy person to do something. Why? Because a busy person's got the most time. Why is that? Because they value their time, and therefore they'll give it to you. But somebody who doesn't value their time, they're all over the place. And in fact, you probably don't want their input. Critical that collectively we see our institutions thrive. It's critical that we see the startups, individuals spinning out and starting their own businesses, the sole traders, getting the mentorship that they need in order to be able to become the donors of tomorrow or the advisors of tomorrow, because that's the fabric of our community. And therefore, giving of one's time is imperative. We've got time to be able to share it with others. And if a person's got what to share or what to give, they've got to give it. It's critical that we can't keep it to ourselves.
Beautiful. David, what's your mission moving forward? If you were in a room with a bunch of business owners, which essentially we are, just virtually, what core principles would you want them to begin considering after hearing this conversation?
Work smartly, which means it's not about the hours. It's about working effectively, efficiently, empowering one's team to grow and to develop and to deliver. I'm a big fan of quality. Whatever a person does, whatever they're doing, they should do it with really focus on quality, not on quantity. Right? Always focus on quality in life over quantity. Quality always trumps. Quality always trumps. And therefore strive to ensure that one's team is delivering quality. One stands personally as a badge of quality. Reputation counts for everything. I want to see businesses succeed. I think it's critical that we look to help each other. We look to leverage each other, give the business, cross-refer, put in a good word for somebody. You never know where that lands. There's so much talent in the community. There's an abundance of talent. Not everybody has the opportunity to express it. Not everybody has necessarily been given the tools to. But there's so much latent talent that can be nurtured and developed. That's how we maintain really continuity, growth, opportunity for others who so desperately need.
Really amazing. Thank you, David. Really appreciate your time putting this together, and looking forward to sharing it with the public. Thank you.
Greatest pleasure. Thank you.